You all know me because of the records I did under the ice on the Mount Everest.
That Wim Hof method was a great starting point for my breathwork journey, 8-9 years ago.
How do you think that breathwork could help business owners?
If you're not breathing right, you're operating at a level that's sub to your optimal.
Did we at some point in time stop learning how to breathe properly? So you're the founder of Optimyze, which is this amazing center. And actually you have 3 centers here in Arizona, which you guys are doing breath work, you guys are doing red light therapy, you guys have got cold plunges, and a bunch of other modalities that you're doing. And you've been doing this now, I think you told me, for like 6 years. And so when a lot of people look at breath work and they say, hey, I think this is just a bunch of like fancy deep breathing, how would you tell them the opposite of that within about 60 seconds?
So yeah, thanks for having me. Deep breathing. So I would say that breath work is just such a wide encompassing category. And so there's so many different trainings with the breath. There's training on different exercises to get different states of consciousness and for all different types of benefits, bringing up the subconscious mind and training the subconscious mind. And then there's also training the habitual breath as well with helping with all different types of health. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely not just deep breathing, and there's a lot more to it.
Is it hyperventilating? Because you'll hear people say, well, breathwork's just a bunch of hyperventilating.
So the term breathwork, a lot of people think of conscious connected breathwork, that deeper breathing where you're connecting the breath with the inhale and exhale, and you're changing the chemistry of the body and doing a whole slew of other things. That's not the only type of breath work. That's one side. And even speaking about that type, it's not hyperventilating because you're doing it consciously. So a lot of the things that we do, whether or not they're with the breath or with other things are typically can be different, whether positive or negative, based on whether you're doing them intentionally or consciously. So in the realm of breath work, holding your breath unconsciously is known as a really negative habit to do when you don't know you're doing it. But if you're doing it and you're knowing you're doing it and you're choosing to do it, it can be extremely beneficial. So the two things, doing one willfully and intentionally, can really be positive. And usually the things that you do unconsciously, there's a lot of things you do unconsciously that might not be positive. Like you don't want to be unconsciously holding your breath typically. That's typically a negative habit.
Yeah, I've been to one of your sessions, which was really cool. Your facility's beautiful. I was laying on the ground, and I was, doing your typical, breath work, like Wim Hof type style, which you were telling me earlier that you're certified in, which would make sense why it felt that way. And it was an incredible experience because I remember feeling very uncomfortable, right, in the breath, and then till where I felt comfortable with when I started to do those longer breath holds, right? And I find that it's easier for me when I'm doing that work to hold my breath than it is to exhale all of my breath. My body wants to go into this really deep panic, even if I'm doing box breathing, right? I'm like, I can hold my breath forever. But letting all of my breath out is a very difficult thing. Is there a tip for that? Is this something normal for people, or is this just something for me? Or what is the psychological side going on here? Because it's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, there's a lot going on when you're over breathing, which is typically what we do, breathing in excess of metabolic demand when you're doing conscious connected breathing. Although there's definitely different types of it. So if you breathe slower and in and out the nose, you'll get to the same place. It'll usually take longer. But because you're blowing out a lot of CO2, the carbon dioxide is lowered in your body, and that's what triggers us to breathe as human beings. It's not the lack of oxygen, but it's the tolerance to carbon dioxide in the blood. So as that carbon dioxide gets blown off when you breathe in excess, you start at a low point, so you can hold your breath a lot longer than you typically can, and it takes a lot longer for that carbon dioxide to get to that level of discomfort where you have to breathe. And so a lot of the training that I do has to do with the habitual training to get your tolerance to CO2 higher so you can breathe less. Because although it's a little bit counterintuitive, the less you breathe, the more oxygen you get to your tissues. So it's not so the advice to take a deep breath, it's really some people really think it's only good advice just because you're more likely to have a long exhale. Really, the long exhale is what gets you to downregulate and calm down. The deep breath in is actually not always the best thing to do, but it is great because after that deep inhale, you usually have a longer exhale.
What about though? I guess what I was explaining is that when I am breathing all the exhale out, right?
Yeah.
That is where the panic comes in for me. And it's like the uncomfortability. Is that because we feel like that we're depriving ourselves of oxygen? Is that because we feel like that we're, basically going to suffocate? Like, what is going on there?
So when you exhale, you mean instead of holding it at the top, you
that's
exhale.
the easiest part for me is holding the air or holding the breath. That's simple.
Yeah.
It's the exhale, the long exhale, right? Especially with even something like box breathing or, longer breathing, but it's the out part of it. And then that's where the uncomfortability comes in. And then the pausing in between the breath to go back in,
Yeah, that's likely because, normally near the end of your exhale, you're going to be at the point where you've been without oxygen, but also the CO2 is getting higher and higher. And that's what can cause anxiety. So a lot of like the tips and tools, just like in anything, but especially in breath work that we might give to somebody, for one person, it might be actually really bad advice. So some of the exercises and some of the methods and modalities that I teach, there's different levels. So if you're somebody with severe panic disorder or panic attacks, some of the exercises won't be appropriate for you to start because it'll put you in a panic. And one of the basic exercises is regulating your breath so it's slightly less than what you normally breathe. So you're basically restricting your breath at a very low point, keeping yourself in a slight state of discomfort, wanting more oxygen, wanting to breathe more, but you're not letting yourself breathe more. I think we did that exercise maybe when you were with me right before we started the conscious connected breathing, but that can be too much for people. And so, it really does depend, but you're probably getting that because your body's triggering you to breathe because that carbon dioxide's at a point higher than you're normally used to.
So how long have you been doing this conscious breathing? Like when did you get into this? How did you start this? Because, you'll see online a lot lately, and that is people doing, I've seen breath work for a long time, but it's become way more mainstream, along with cold plunges, along with, all of the biohacking, right? Like it's becoming a lot more mainstream, which is great because it's helping health. But like, what got you into it before? I mean, you've been doing this for 6 years professionally, which means you were doing it before that. You weren't just all of a sudden open a business and then say, I'm going to learn how to do this now. Like that would be probably not the most way efficient to run a company.
Yeah, no, 100% right. I've been doing it for a while, and what first got me into it, well, it's interesting. I started doing yoga back in 2000, so 25 years ago, which is wild. I started more of just focused on the physical practice, the asanas, and never really dove too much into it. And despite doing yoga for so long, for 10, 15 years, I had worked with the breath and in martial arts as well. But it wasn't until I read about Wim Hof and I did his method that I was first exposed to conscious connected breath work, even though I had heard about holotropic breath work and rebirthing, but I had never partaken in one of those experiences. So that's what drew me in. So when I first did it, and I'm like many people, I'm a doer. I like to get a lot done. I like to work hard. And so I always found it really enjoyable. After my yoga practice, Savasana was my favorite part. And I began back in the early 2000s is when I was in Savasana. I would play with the energy in my body and start to work to create like physical sensations. in the body. So I would maybe focus on, one of the things I would do a lot was focus on my nose and bring the energy and try to see if I could actually get a physical sensation. And so I'd imagine all these little molecules coming up to the tip of my nose. And sure enough, after doing this, I mean, I would have my nose like vibrating, and I would just be kind of really like impressed with myself almost. You know, I was I don't know if my ego was served, but I would really start moving this energy around and feeling like this physical sensation. I was just like, I could believe it, but it was really surprising. I would share this with other people, and not all of them would have. Most people didn't have the same experience. But I started studying more about energy work and things like that. And it wasn't until that I did the conscious connected breath work that it got me very quickly in that state that took usually an hour to get in like a yoga class. So,
How long did it take you to get in that state?
10 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe 10 minutes.
Just by doing the conscious breathing, you're able to get in that state in 10 minutes versus the hour. So really optimizing that time down.
Right. Yeah. Really doing it. And so, you know, practicing and starting to do this breath work every day for a while, in a short period of time, it really changed my state of being and my ability to deal with at the time, some struggles that I was going on in my life and with my marriage at the time, and being a new parent and owning a business and running a business and all that stuff. I was really stressed, and I was no longer in my outlet as a professional martial artist. So I was looking for something to kind of fill that void, and the conscious connected breathwork really met me right where I needed to be, and it really helped me. And I was blown away at how simple and how effective it was, and that's what led me to continue in these courses. And then I never had intended to be an instructor under Wim Hof. I just went to the advanced training, and then they had the instructor training. I met so many great people that I really vibed with. And one of them was my business partner now in Optimyze. So, you know, but for me, that was kind of the beginning of a lot more understanding and learning. And I'm still, you know, learning as a student, but that Wim Hof method was a great starting point for my breathwork journey, you know, 8-9 years ago. And so, I think it's still great. You know, you could use it, and there's different variations and there's different training. So now, yeah, it's super trendy. It's great to see that it's really become popular, because I think a lot more people are being exposed to it. And there are, like anything, there can be negatives and things that I've learned that you have to maybe watch out for, or you know, be careful of.
Yeah, you got to use your own. You got to use your own discernment for sure on anything that is spiritual or physical or mental or emotional. Like, you know, you got to be your own. In a way, you got to be your own doctor. You know, you got to be your own advocate for the most part. And if something doesn't feel right, then it's probably not the place that you want to be, and to move out of that, and, you know, not to try to drink the Kool-Aid. Because one of the things I've noticed about breath work is it can be almost hallucinogenic. Like, it can get I can get out of my body. I can, how do I say this? I'm able to hear, I don't want to call the other side, but I'm able to hear more of my higher self speak to me. And I will often use breath work to hear my higher self and then to speak it out loud on my own. People might call that channeling, and I don't feel it's the same way. And I can ask questions back and forth with myself and be able to get in this really beautiful state of unattachment and unawareness. What is going on there in the body? Like, because I want to believe that it's definitely something very spiritual, and it feels like it is. And it feels like I'm able to open up to different realms and different experiences with that, which sounds like people are like, wait a minute, with your breath? Well, if you haven't done it before, then you don't know what I'm talking about, of course.
Yeah.
But for those that have done it, what is going on? Like, what is your belief behind this? Because I can't count how many, I don't even know how many, like, breath work workshops and groups and things you've led. I can only imagine it's been plenty of people. So the things you must have seen, from, you know, women having orgasms, to people crying, to people screaming, to people, you know, like, just all kinds of things that the body does, shaking and all that, which is it's the same things as hallucinogens.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of my teachers really, his explanation always stuck with me, and so my belief is that as you're going through this this breath work, you're really shedding layers of the ego and of of your persona. And so if you think about the dot of wherever you came from, your birth, as the center point of your life, of your purpose, if you're a spiritual person or a believer of God, that's where you came from, and you started as that dot. And then as you grow and as you develop your personality and your identities, this circle spirals out, potentially in aspects away from who you originally were. But it's where we have to live on some aspects, because we are dealing with life on a day-to-day basis. We're working, so we're on the outside of the circle, we're arguing, we're doing things on this outside of the circle. And so the way I see it is that as we're going through this breath work, we're actually going back and shedding those layers of the persona back to who we really are, like at the core, what kind of makes us who we are. So oftentimes in this breath work, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, but just everything else disappears, and you're just left there with just yourself and this feeling of really who you are. And so it's a really beautiful place to be. And so the belief on some of my teaching and stuff is that all this talk therapy is great, but if you don't travel back down to the source of the feeling of who you were and then work your way back out, you're really just going to always stay stuck in this outer level of trying to explain things and think things and rationalize stuff and explain your past trauma and understand it at a mental level, but not at a feeling level. So it brings you back to deeply of like who you feel you are, the sense of feeling of where you came from. And so, yeah, that's how I see it.
Do you, every time you do breath work, do you experience that? Like, do you get to the point in time where you've done so much breath work, you're like, okay, like this is just Tuesday, you know what I mean? Like, yes, it's intentional, I get it. But like, do you still have the same experiences that you had when you first started off breath work?
A lot of my breath work, I consider breath work anytime you're bringing your awareness to your breath. Really, that's breath work. I mean, if you're just breathing throughout the day and you're not aware or conscious or checking in, you're not doing breath work. You're living your life, and that's great. But even when you're living your life, those moments where you check back in, how am I breathing now? Maybe you just check in with yourself. You notice how you're breathing in the moment. That, to me, that's breath work. So anything with awareness, mindfulness with the breath is breath work. So a lot of the breath work I do is really just working to bring more awareness to how I'm breathing in different moments, checking in. Some of it's really, some of it's trying to notice the breath and just observe how I'm breathing. But inevitably, a lot of times when you notice, you do start to alter the way you're breathing. And so I work on really trying to breathe and take that perfect breath, which maybe there's no such thing, because we're supposed to breathe differently in different moments, in different situations. But when I'm calm and when I'm peaceful and I want to be calm and collected, and then I'm going to really try to breathe really gracefully and really slowly, and expanding deep within and 360 degrees, and also slowly, light, low, slow, and deep. And so that's most of my breath work, is training my body to breathe like that, because that's how we want to be breathing for the vast majority of our life, when we're not exercising, when we're not, having to do so many different things, but when we're at rest. So, but when I do the upregulating breath work or the conscious connected breathing, where I'm really looking to reset my nervous system, and maybe it's after a really busy day, maybe it's right when I woke up, that oftentimes, I'm not getting as deep. So to get really deep and to shed all those layers, it can take a while. It might not happen after 10 minutes. So you get a little taste of it. And so if depending on the time. So yeah, definitely not all the time do I get to that level, and every time is different. And so I agree with you. It's a lot like, experiences with different types of plant medicine. I feel like the subconscious mind surfaces up. So, that's another thing we really go over. And in different avenues, these breathwork groups are really great. I think overall, I'm a big fan. And if you get somebody that's experienced and repressed a lot of things that they're not ready to have unleashed and come up, and they've done zero work on it, and the first time they're going to experience this is with a psychedelic or with a deep breathwork session, it might not be the first step they want to take. I think breathwork's probably safer than psychedelics because you can't slow down or speed up necessarily with psychedelics. So
once you're on the journey, you're on the journey.
Yeah.
Speaking of, what is a time when you have been in these experiences that scared you the most?
I would say there has been a few experiences where I've started to, the mind will take you places that you experience what you feel like is, your own. So I've been in these experiences where I know I'm not actually dying, in deep breathwork sessions, but actually one that just came into mind. A lot of these I've used a lot of the tools where even in cold water training and ice baths, a lot of it is really letting go of that discomfort. So I bring that with me in a lot of my experiences, and not just with the cold water. So a lot of times I'm able to breathe through these experiences. But one really scary experience was that I was in a deep breathwork session, and I'd been traveling. Actually, I drove from the Czech Republic to Poland, and it was like a 3-hour drive, and maybe I didn't get much sleep the night before, and I was still acclimating to the big time change from coming over from here, and so about in the 6th or 7th round of the breathwork we were doing, and this is actually with Wim Hof was leading the session for us. I started to really cramp up with my fingers, and if for the audience that have done breathwork, you've experienced this, but sometimes you're over breathing, and there's several different explanations for why this happens, but my body started to lock up, and so it started to lock up really hard all through the body and cramp, and at that point, I held my breath. So doing this so long, you can lean in, and sometimes, right, when you're doing this breathing, we instruct people if it becomes too much and the sensation is too much, you slow down or you take an early breath hold. So I was definitely a little bit scared at that point because my whole body, the sensations were starting to lock up, and usually that never happened to that extent, and it was much more intense, and I don't know exactly why. So I just I didn't keep going into it. I slowed down, took an early breath hold. So that's one experience that definitely was a little bit scary.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. When you were working with Wim Hof is because, you're going through these trainings, you're going through these experiences with him. What was one of the things that was like the most intense thing? Like, do you notice that Wim Hof, when it comes to the student side, I mean, a practitioner, that they're pushing you harder than say what they would push someone like myself?
Yeah, I was the second part of the second class in the United States of the instructor program that ever existed. So it was earlier on in the instructor training. So it's evolved over the years, and it reminds me of like, we went to high school. You're like, oh, we used to get hazed, or it was way tougher when we were there.
exactly.
It's that like feeling is so and they've become a bigger organization, and I think people have taken the method and actually not even done the method and done harm to themselves. So. But back when we were there, I think, yeah, for sure, they want to push the instructors a little further and make sure, they can handle certain things. So, we had some things we did that they don't do anymore. Like we hiked out ours was in Colorado, my instructor class, and we went into like a large frozen lake, that was like 45-minute hike out in the snow, and so. That was we were in there for about 10 minutes, and then, you get out into 15-degree weather. So, usually it's not, the most difficult part isn't going into the cold, it's warming up afterwards, especially when you're in nature. And that's really the dangerous part. You gotta warm up so you don't experience the hypothermia. So a lot of the workshops that WIM does and our instructors, we're not pushing it too extreme. Like, you're getting an ice bath for a few minutes, you're really learning about the science, you're learning about the breath, and then you're learning how to warm up and keep that focus. So there definitely was moments we walked in our bare feet in the snow. They had ice baths all around the lodge that we were staying in with WIM. And so the first night after we went in the frozen lake, we come back and one of the guys, and WIM shows up, and one of the other instructors, we weren't instructors yet at that point, it's like, who wants to do an ice bath, And I was like, I'm good. I'm fine. I've already done a bunch of ice baths today. I don't need to go. And WIM said, sure. And so him and WIM and a few others went out and did more ice baths. It was like 9 p.m. And then like later that night, I go and I'm like, I'm going to take a warm shower before bed. I shower before bed. Usually that's kind of a routine and a ritual that I've had for a while. And I go in the shower and there's no hot water. And I'm like, those motherfuckers, they planned this to make it. And I got to just deal with this. And it was like, it was the winter in Colorado. So it was,
Let's go.
it was below freezing, And so I was filthy though. So I had to rinse off in this cold water. And, but lo and behold, it was an accident. The water, like, it had busted or something. The hot water had busted in the cabin.
It's interesting. I've had experiences like that in trainings, like where you're going through some really deep work, right? And your mind will start to play that game of like, oh, this is part of the process. Oh, this is part of the game. Oh, this is part of the thing. And next thing you know, you're thinking things are going on that are really not going on, but you've convinced yourself they are, which is ideal for what you were just talking about. How do you think that breathwork could help business owners?
Breathwork is so important. I mean, it ties into every aspect of our lives. So it's your overall health, it's your focus, it's your your brain activity. If you're 100%, is there. If you're not breathing right, you're operating at a level that's sub to your optimal. So it's just so important, the oxygen that you're getting and your efficiency in assimilating that oxygen. And, the way you breathe is really, as, I don't know, cliche as it sounds, but it is the way you live. And when you really start to understand that, you're like, wow, if you notice somebody that, and it's always easier to notice in other people, of course. So there's all the time. I mean, I've been studying and focused on breath all the time, and there's so many moments that I catch myself, or I see myself, maybe catching myself of a habit that I didn't know that I had. And so if you see somebody that is a really tense person, you'll notice that usually shows itself in different signs. And somebody might be biting their lip constantly, and it's hard to breathe when you're doing a physical activity that's like contracting. it's going to be hard for your breath to flow as well, and so a lot of the simple things that are more scientific for business owners and your regular everyday people to understand is that we have breathing muscles that mostly are the diaphragm, and then there's a lot of other ancillary muscles, but a lot of people are using their shoulder muscles, their chest, these muscles that have nothing to do with breath and your breathing to breathe. And so they're engaging their chest, or their shoulders, I should say, is more accurate, in their breathing. So throughout the day, thousands, tens of thousands of breath, and and many people out there are trained. They've trained themselves through bad habits and dysfunctional habits to engage their shoulder muscles when they breathe. And so you're doing this, tens of thousands of times a day. And so like you're wasting so many resources on your breathing when it's not efficient. And so this is going to use resources that can be used for other things. I mean, it's really all about, being efficient and conserving your energy for the things that you want and need your energy for.
Did we at some point in time stop learning how to breathe properly? Was it because we started sitting down? Was it because of our comfort in our society? Or is this something that's just been what we can, because you've been studying breath for a while, right? So, and breathing, is this something that's been coming on in the 20th century, the 21st century? Like, when did we start doing this? Because when we talk about it, it's like, well, you should naturally breathe this way. And it's like, okay, well, if I should naturally breathe this way, then why the hell am I not naturally breathing this way, you know?
And we start typically breathing normal as babies, most people. And then, there's a lot of different components to that. I mean, you see a lot of different development even as newborns with the facial structure and the airway and the way the mouth and the jaw develop. And so I think, there's a lot of different factors at play. One, I think probably the food that we've been eating and over just a couple of generations now have changed the way a lot of our teeth have developed, and maybe the strength of the jaw and the shape, and then, the positioning of the tongue. If you start breathing with your mouth, like a lot of people have to, your mouth and your face isn't going to develop properly. And so there's a lot of different things at play. Sitting, the modern lifestyle, for sure, food and diet. You said something
about food though. What were we eating that we're not eating now that was shaping our jaws and helping us, with more functionality in our bodies?
So it's, think about all the food-like substances that we've been eating. That's gonna tie into also, certain gene expression and things like that. So I think there's a component where a lot of us are, starting off with some genetic expressions of certain things that make it more difficult. Like you see a lot of, I have a 1-year-old now. He was born and his chin, is a little bit further back. It's
really?
like not the perfect facial structure, right?
Right.
So it already makes it more difficult for him to breathe through his nose,
right.
And I think this is seen a lot. There's a lot of natural ways to fix this as well. But I think the food and the chewing, you're seeing so many kids now and adults that, they need the sleep apnea machines. They're not able. It's hard for them to breathe through your nose.
Yeah, and it used to just be people that were really overweight needed that, right? And now you're seeing it in a lot of other different ways that people need sleep apnea machines. With your children, do you teach them how to breathe proper? Like, and how do you install like this habit in them to breathe differently, because the benefit it's going to be long term if they can form these habits now?
I work a lot. I tell them a lot, and they do know, the importance of nose breathing. I keep it really basic. I mean, they don't want to hear, they don't want to. I try to tell them a lot of stuff. If any dads,
I can only imagine.
if any dads are listening, yeah, you want you want to tell your kids and you wish the best for them, but sometimes they don't always want to listen to you. But I work to give them the education, and some of that is, yes, breathe through your nose. If you're not speaking, and if you're not singing, if you're not using your mouth, because the mouth could be used for communication and singing and so many different things. So it's not just inherently bad just because you breathe through your mouth. But like we discussed before, if you're unconsciously mouth breathing when you're not speaking, it's a really bad habit. So that's one thing I really work with them on and just remind them. And so there are exercises, there are a lot of exercises you can do with kids. And one of my biological dentist acquaintances, what she used to do is if she gave her kids like an ice pop, they would have to hold after they were done, they would have to hold the stick in their mouth between their lips.
Oh, really?
In order for them to be allowed to watch TV, in it. So she shared that with me. Wow, I've never heard that one. But
that's a different one.
Yeah. So just giving them that knowledge though, and learning. There's so much with James Nestor kind of repopularized Patrick McGowan, who repopularized the Buteyko method, the Russian system. I'm an instructor under that system as well. And so that got really popular. James Nestor's book, Breathe, cites a lot of science. A lot of people really relate to that. And he talks about the evolution as well. So a lot of the reason he touches on some of those points, but it's a little complicated. So I don't really know the exact cause of it. But
yeah, it was just something I was curious about. With your whole business being about optimization, right? A lot of people have morning routines and all this stuff. Like it's common, but the morning routines ends up being many hours involved. Yeah. If I could only do one thing on a daily basis, whether it was red light therapy, breath work, meditation, we could go on and on. What would be that one thing that'd be the most beneficial?
It'd be hard for me to give you one thing, not knowing, the intricacies of your life and what you're working on. And so I would just say, it doesn't have to be complicated. I think a lot of people, and it's whatever works for you. So I like to combine things in my busy life because a lot of times I don't have tons of time. So I do like to be really efficient as much as I can with the time. And then I also have to remind myself that a lot of these biohacking tools, they are simply mimicking nature in many regards. So just getting outside in the sun, like you can, red light therapy is great, but if you're not getting in the sun and you're just doing red light therapy, you might kind of have it backwards. Like you want to use these things as supplements, and in this modern world, most of us are in more of a city environment. So we need to supplement with nature because we're not getting enough of it. We're inside, we got the blue light, we're not getting sunlight in the eyes. So I think getting connected more with nature or the elements of nature, that's what really Optimyze is all about. It's, it's meant for the modern life to get in 7-8 different natural therapies within like 70 minutes. And so you could combine, mindfulness and gratitude and nature all within a very short period of time. So that would be my advice is try to start to weave mindfulness into every day, into all your activities as much as you can. And breath work. You don't need to go sit and go to an hour breath work class. It's great too, but you can just start to bring that awareness to your breath, start to learn how you should be breathing. You could check out my YouTube and my Instagram. I share some of that stuff, but there's a lot of great advice out there for ways to be breathing. So getting a little bit of knowledge, educating yourself, and then starting to integrate these things into what you already do.
Yeah, it was what you just said about nature. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that oh yeah, red light therapy, the sun, cold plunge, the river, breath, obviously about as natural as it gets. Gratitude, I mean, for everything around us, that's something that's so easy and simple. But it's cool that your guys' businesses made it so it's super easy for people to get it in 70 minutes. They can get everything in at one point in time, especially if they live in the city, right? What, over the last, what's something that you now see that is extremely healthy that you didn't realize 5 years ago? Like you just had an awareness that this is something much healthier than what you once thought it was.
One thing that really shifted for me, and I continue to remind myself, is that there's things that are unhealthy for some people in certain times and great for other people. So you hear all these diet, talks about, do this and do that. Everybody who has an experience of something that really changed their life, a lot of us want to share it with other people. And so I think most of it's really well intended. It's like cold plunging worked for me. Like you should do it, and the carnivore diet cured me. So you should be carnivore. Or, I went vegan and I feel great. So I think just that, understanding that we're very adaptive as humans, and we also do a lot of different things, and we think differently. So the thought process and what you believe is good for you obviously plays a big role into that. So if you're somebody that, just has a really hard time and feels terrible about eating meat, and, meat might not be good for that person because they think it's so terrible, but, maybe it would be good for them if they had a different perspective on it. So I think that's changed my belief, where I think I used to be more like, hey, this is the way you should eat. And now it's a little bit different. So
Yeah, I've heard that, a lot of the things that we put in our body is all energy. So if we have a negative energy towards something, it's probably not going to do us all that well versus a belief, no different than the placebo effect on certain aspects. I mean, diving into, if you look at Wim Hof and what he did with Iceman and all the things, I just thought none of those were believable or true. Like, how could they be? And then to see that people were actually redefining what was truth. And that I remember watching that and being like, this is absolutely incredible. Earlier, we were talking about how breath work and all these things become mainstream, and they're, on the internet, they're everywhere. What do you think is going to be mainstream that is not mainstream right now in the next 10 years? What do you think is going to change drastically in health?
I see a lot of this health movement really continuing to grow. And so it's really at an interesting point. So I kind of saw, we were talking about martial arts, and I had watched the first UFC way back, and I just knew, I saw that sport was going to blow up. I just knew it, and I had got into it as an athlete, but I wanted to, wow, if I could somehow get involved, I know this business is going to be good. But tying it back into what you were saying with the trends, and the same with Wim Hof, the cold water, I knew just how drastically it changed my life. And everybody I had that started to do that program or was willing to get in and give it a go, their life was changed. So I was just, when we opened Optimyze, the first one 6 years ago, there was so many people that that were in my circle that just were so dumbfounded by why would I do this? Why would I got this other business? What are you doing starting in an ice bath place? That's what they thought it was. Some people still think that's what it is, but they were just so confused, so you can't always listen to the naysayers. And but I saw the trend in that. And so now, I just see the world of health, and I think adapting and maybe changing foods. I see that alternative health, which is really traditional health, because a lot of these alternative health systems have been around for longer, and I think it's a really good question, because I want to I see the larger categories, but I don't know on the smaller scale. I think, we're already seeing since we opened, we were. I like to say, because I do believe it to be true, that we were the first at Optimyze to put all these therapies together in one spot in an intentional community environment. There were spots that were athletic, focused on athletes that had some of this and some of that, but there was nothing like us that I'd ever seen, and I was searching for something, and I definitely saw a lot of other places that we took bits and pieces of and inspirations from. And so looking forward, I think, things are going to keep evolving. And one of our goals is to actually hit the masses. So we do want to spread our concept, worldwide.
You were saying you've got the franchise model that people can get involved in, which is really cool because you were one of the first people I know of to be able to create that community side behind it. It wasn't about athletes. It wasn't about, I wouldn't even say it was about biohacking. It was simply about being as healthy as you possibly can in a community standpoint. I think that if I was to look at the same question, I was posing it to myself as you were answering that, and I think we're going to see a lot with peptides. I think we're going to see a lot more regenerative organs. I think we're going to see a lot more of our devices and our technology integrating in with our health systems. I think our food systems are going to have to change. Our water systems are going to have to change. Our air quality is going to have to change. And we're going to have to utilize technology in order to do that. And we're also going to have to make sure that we're still don't allow the technology to run us over, and that we connect back to nature and do our best not to destroy nature. Because it's like that fine line, right? As we grow technology and we try to optimize many things in our life, because there's this new movement of how do we live to be 140 or 150 or, as we do that, we're also taking up a lot more space and a lot more resources on this planet. So it's fascinating to see what's going to happen that way. When, you've been doing this a long time, and I really appreciate the energy and the time and the effort that you've put into bringing something that was not mainstream at the time to make it mainstream. But when all's said and done, when you're no longer here, your body hits the ground, and all that's left of you is a transformation of your soul somewhere else. What do you want to be remembered for?
That's a deep question.
That's why we ask it.
Yeah. And, I have been doing it for a long time, but I'm like a beginner, especially even in years compared to so many. I mean, I have teachers and mentors that I've met along the way. They're in their 80s. I got to meet, I'll never forget this woman, Benny Dansby. She was one of the first rebirthers, and she was doing water births back in the 60s and using the rebirthing through birthing, but amazing woman. So there's so many people. So I'm like a rookie compared to them, you know what I mean? But I love this stuff, and I think as far as being remembered, just I want my energy to live on, and the spirit that to live on, and in kind of the name of living your truth and doing the best that you can, and really giving 100% and standing for something. I think it's really important for us in this life to really work to stand for something, and to speak our minds even when it's not popular. And that's what I like to think about there. And I do like also to bring in this idea that I do believe that our spirit and our souls are immortal. I don't think the soul dies. I think it carries on. So in many ways, I think that it is a really, at least at minimum, a good exercise to settle into the idea that you're going to live forever.
Yeah, this experience is temporary.
Yeah, meaning that you think it ends, and so it's I think it's a really fun and interesting exercise. It's like, imagine you lived your life as if that there was there was an infinite, there's two games, right? The opposite of that is, imagine you die tomorrow. What are you going to do today? And I like that one too. It's like, life is short, and what are you going to do? And then there's the flip side. It's like, imagine, your soul goes on forever. What does that do to the way you live? It's also pretty amazing when you think about it. You're like, wow, you don't have to be rushing around all the time, and you can maybe be a little more present. But yeah, I want to keep thinking about, that. I want my kids to remember me and live in my name. And I try to really do the best. Those that I've loved that have passed, their life motivates me to live in a way that they would be proud of, or that I think, would make them proud, and would serve.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's, I mean, our souls will continue to move and learn and grow and develop, you know what I mean? But we are going to leave those people behind here. And hopefully we've done enough here to be a good steward of our life, because there's a lot of people that watch the show that are usually in their younger, 25, 35, somewhere around there. If you could say anything to them that would be something that could create optimization in their life, what would you tell them as we start to wrap this up?
Slow down for sure. And I would say, you don't need to have all the answers. There's a lot of, I think, people, young people that think they have to pretend that they know everything. They have to put up like some facade, and, it's totally not necessary. Like, nobody cares about what you know. If you know everything, it's like, you can be curious. So that would be my advice, is just stay curious and stay open, and start to just explore and get to know the things that you love doing, and be open to new experiences and new things. And not everything's going to happen overnight.
Majority of things won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
They won't. When you said that, I can't help to reflect, and it's that a moment ago, you said that you're a baby, you're a student, like you're just beginning. And I thought, man, how curious how you must have been in your life, and you are, to learn the practice you've learned and go down the path you've gone to, and open up the businesses you've opened up. And then also at the same time, literally have no ego in it and say, I'm kind of new at all this stuff. I think that shows a lot about your character. It shows a lot about your curiosity, and that that like there is no, there's no rival in any of this stuff. So I really appreciate you coming out here. And if anybody wants to find anything out about you, your business, yourself, and follow along and get these recordings you're talking about, so they can start to get deeper into their own breath, deeper into their own consciousness and awareness, where do they find you?
They would find me on YouTube, Jay Moreng. Kids used to call me Lemon Meringue, or that nickname, but my last name is Moreng. And so they can find me on YouTube. They can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn. I got a company also that I do my breath workshops out of, called Breathworks. So I lead breathwork workshops and trainings for business, corporate. We also do corporate events at Optimyze. I'm really proud of my other business. It's a commercial landscape business, and we're the first company in Arizona to eliminate the use of glyphosate.
Oh, wow. That's
and
a
we
big
did
deal.
that like 5 years ago. We stopped using that chemical. So we serve a lot of commercial communities and properties, residential communities, but it's common area stuff. But we do that, and just always trying to learn and grow, and please follow me. We love having people in when they're visiting. We're looking to partner with our first franchise here in the States, a really good partner that sees our vision, and it's really exciting to see all this stuff blowing up, because people are really taking charge of their health, instead of subbing it out, giving it away to somebody else. It's like I really think we have to step into our own power and really lean in and decide how we're going to live our lives and take more control over our health. And love what you're doing here, and really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to see where you end up the next 6, 7, 10 years. And I'm excited to see all the franchises across the United States because you put so much love and heart into what you do. So thank you again.
Thank you.
All right,
Awesome,
man.
brother.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Absolutely.